I never thought I'd see the day when I would look at my daughter and wonder if she was still the same person I'd raised. The sharp realization came without warning, like a sudden gust of wind that blows the door open, leaving no room for doubt. I had always believed in her, even when she made mistakes, even when she was defiant in her teenage years. But this was different. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate betrayal. It started innocently enough, just like any other evening. I was going through my paperwork, balancing my finances, when I found it, a letter that didn't belong to me. At first, I thought it was a mix-up. Perhaps a document intended for someone else had found its way into my mailbox. But when I opened it, my stomach churned. It was a loan approval letter, one I had never signed. There, at the bottom of the page, was my signature, only it wasn't mine. I thought I must be mistaken, but the more I looked at the paper, the more everything clicked into place. I hadn't signed anything. I hadn't even applied for a loan. It didn't take long for me to realize, someone had forged my signature. Someone I loved. Someone I trusted. Someone I had spent my life nurturing, loving, and providing for. I thought my daughter and her husband were trustworthy, but they had quietly manipulated me for their own gain. The truth sank in slowly, but it was undeniable. I stared at the document, my heart pounding. This wasn't a simple mistake. This was betrayal, an intricate web of lies, forged papers, and stolen trust. They had done this behind my back, and I had been completely blind to it. The rage was there, simmering just beneath the surface, but I couldn't let it control me. I had to stay calm. I needed to understand how deep this went. This wasn't just a financial misstep, it was personal. The shock of it all left me numb at first. How could my daughter, the girl I had raised from birth, the one I had sacrificed so much for, do this to me? I had been there for her through everything, the sleepless nights when she was a baby, the first heartbreak she endured as a teenager, and the overwhelming joy of watching her graduate. I thought she understood the depth of my love for her, the sacrifices I had made, and yet, here she was, using me, betraying me, for what? Money? Status? A better life at my expense? I didn't know what to do with the feelings that swirled inside me. Anger, hurt, confusion, they all mixed together into a toxic cloud. I couldn't just confront her right away. I had to be smart. I couldn't let her know I had discovered the truth. Not yet. I needed to prepare. The last thing I wanted was to make a scene, but this wasn't something I could simply let slide. This wasn't just about a loan, it was about the betrayal of my trust, the emotional abuse of using me as a stepping stone for their own benefit. I decided I had to find out more. I couldn't just take one document as proof. I hired a private investigator. I needed to know if this was an isolated incident or if there was more to it. Over the next few weeks, I watched my daughter and her husband closely. I kept my emotions in check, but every moment felt like a betrayal. The smallest gestures, the casual conversations, they all seemed to carry new weight. I began to notice how often they whispered when they thought I wasn't listening, how their smiles didn't seem as genuine as they once had. It was all a lie, carefully constructed to keep me in the dark. The private investigator came back with more. A lot more. It wasn't just a forged signature. There were emails between my daughter and her husband, detailing their plans to access my bank accounts, to manipulate me into signing away control of my finances. They had been plotting this for months, possibly even longer. And the worst part? They thought I would never notice. They thought I was too naive, too trusting to figure out what they were doing. I couldn't believe it. The betrayal cut deeper with every new piece of information I uncovered. They had stolen from me in the worst possible way, not just financially, but emotionally. I had spent years raising her, giving her everything, and this is how she repaid me? The anger that had been simmering inside me slowly began to boil over. How could she do this? How could she look me in the eye and pretend everything was normal while planning this behind my back? But I wasn't ready to confront them. Not yet. I needed to take my time and plan my next steps carefully. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. I had to remain composed, calm. I would confront them on my terms, when the time was right. They would not get away with this. It was around this time that I realized something else, something that made my blood run cold. I had always believed that family, that the bond between a mother and child, was unbreakable. But now, I felt a shift. That bond was still there, but it had been tarnished, weakened by lies and betrayal. How could I trust her again? How could I ever look at her the same way? The emotional toll it took on me was immense. I found myself constantly thinking about the years I had spent building a life for us, only to have it destroyed by the very people I trusted the most. My heart ached. How could she do this to me? What had happened to the daughter I had raised? The one I had been so proud of? The quiet, everyday moments became unbearable. I couldn't look at her without feeling this deep, unsettling sense of betrayal. It wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the deep emotional wound that had been opened, one that would take years to heal. If it ever healed at all. Every time I saw her, I was reminded of what she had done, of the trust she had shattered in a single, calculated move. But as much as it hurt, I couldn't back down. I couldn't let this go. I had to take control of my own life again. I had to show her that actions have consequences. I would not allow this betrayal to define me, and I would not let her walk away from this unscathed. She had made her choices, and now, it was time for her to face the consequences. As I sat there, staring at the documents in front of me, I made a decision. I would not confront her just yet. I would wait for the perfect moment, the right time to reveal the truth. I needed to see her face when she realized that I had known all along. That I had been watching, waiting. She thought she could get away with it, but I was smarter than that. And when the time came, she would see just how wrong she was. This was just the beginning. And I was ready. Ready to face the pain, ready to face her, ready to take back what was mine. I wasn't going to let her ruin me. No, the story wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning. The moment arrived like a slow burn, the kind of event that was inevitable but still jolted my entire being when it happened. The family gathering was in full swing, laughs echoed in the living room, clinking glasses sounded from the kitchen, and the smell of roast chicken filled the air. A Sunday evening. One of those moments when everyone pretends everything is fine, and the world feels safe again. It was a comfortable lie, one I had grown used to over the years. But that night, the lie would unravel, and I would be the one to rip the seams open. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Weeks in which I had concealed my emotions, acted the part of the mother who was none the wiser, all the while knowing that everything I had believed in was crumbling. I had gathered the evidence I needed. Emails, forged documents, statements that exposed their actions for what they were. The trust they had shattered, the love they had twisted into something unrecognizable. They didn't know I had been watching, quietly, patiently, as they continued to play their game. As I walked into the room, my heart was oddly calm. The clamor of the family around me seemed distant, muffled by the determination swelling inside of me. My daughter and her husband were laughing with my brother-in-law, making small talk about the latest family gossip. They had no idea what I had in store for them. They thought they could smile their way through this, that they could bury the truth under the facade of normalcy. But the truth always comes to the surface, whether you're ready for it or not. I had rehearsed this moment in my head 1,000 times, each time imagining a different reaction, a different outcome. But now, as I stood there in the middle of the room, everything was clearer than it had ever been. I didn't need to yell or cause a scene. I didn't need to become the victim they thought I would be. No, this was going to be different. I was going to show them that I knew everything, and that their lies no longer had a hold over me. I took a deep breath and walked over to the table where my daughter and her husband were sitting. The room seemed to hush around me, the noise from the others fading away as I approached. There was a slight tremor in my hand as I placed the stack of papers in front of them, documents that would expose everything. The loan approval letter, emails detailing their plan, forged signatures, everything they thought they could get away with. I looked at my daughter first, her face frozen in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her husband, on the other hand, was immediately on edge, his eyes darting between the papers and my calm expression. The shock didn't come right away. Instead, there was a moment of hesitation, a brief pause in time where they both tried to make sense of what was happening. It was as though they both thought they could talk their way out of it, that they could still control the narrative. "Mom," my daughter said, her voice trembling, but she didn't look at me. She was staring at the papers, avoiding my gaze. "This isn't what it looks like." I didn't flinch. I didn't give her the satisfaction of an emotional reaction. The years of love and sacrifice I had given her didn't matter in that moment. The betrayal was too deep, and I had no more room in my heart to feel sorry for her. She had crossed a line, and now she would face the consequences. I leaned forward, my voice steady but sharp. You've been lying to me for months. Forging my signature, stealing from me. I trusted you, Allison. I trusted you and your husband. And this is what you've done. My words were measured, quiet, but they hit harder than any scream could have. The room was silent now, every eye fixed on us, watching the drama unfold. Her eyes darted to her husband, then back to me. There was no apology, no remorse. Just panic. Mom, please, you don't understand. It was never supposed to go this far. We didn't mean to hurt you. Her words felt empty, like a rehearsed script. She had been preparing for this moment, trying to anticipate my reaction, but she wasn't prepared for me to be calm. For me to be unshaken. I shook my head slowly, taking in the weight of her words. It doesn't matter now, I said, my voice low. The truth is out. And there's no going back from that. I didn't want to hear excuses or explanations. There was nothing left to say. I had already seen through the lies, already watched them unravel before me. At that moment, my son-in-law stood up, his face flushing with anger and embarrassment. This isn't right, he muttered, his voice growing louder. You're making a scene, trying to ruin everything. His bravado was quickly fading, his confidence slipping away. He had always been the smooth talker, the one who knew how to manipulate situations to his advantage. But now, in front of everyone, he was nothing more than a man caught in a lie. I remained seated, watching them both as their world began to collapse. They had expected me to be the weak one, the one who would fold under pressure, but they hadn't realized that I was already done. I had seen the truth, and there was no coming back from it. My daughter's face went pale, the color draining from her skin as the reality of the situation sank in. She tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. I could see her struggling to find a way out, but there was no escape. She had no more excuses to offer. She had no more words that would save her. Her husband's attempt to regain control only made it worse. He began pacing, muttering under his breath, trying to salvage the situation with empty words. We can fix this, we can make it right, he said, but no one was listening to him. The silence in the room was deafening, and it was clear that no one believed him anymore. I let them stumble through their lies, watching them unravel in real time. The satisfaction I should have felt didn't come immediately. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about seeing them humiliated. It was about finally having control of the situation. The years of emotional manipulation, the quiet gaslighting, all of it was laid bare. The truth was out, and they had nowhere to hide. As the evening went on, I didn't say much more. There was no need. My daughter and her husband sat in stunned silence, unable to find the words to explain themselves any longer. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel the vindication I thought I would. Instead, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight I had carried for months, the weight of knowing something was terribly wrong but not being able to prove it, was finally lifted. The others in the room began to quietly disperse, murmuring amongst themselves. Some avoided eye contact, others seemed too stunned to speak. No one knew what to say, and I didn't expect them to. This wasn't their fight. It wasn't about them. It was about me, about finally standing up for myself after everything they had taken from me. I didn't look back at my daughter and her husband as I walked away. There was no need for another word. The damage was done, and now, they would have to live with the consequences of their actions. It wasn't about forgiveness or reconciliation anymore. It was about facing the truth, and knowing that they had no choice but to live with it. As I retreated to my room, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The weight of the situation still lingered, but I knew that it was over. The truth had been revealed, and I had done what needed to be done. There was nothing left for me to say. The finality of it all settled around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. It had been weeks since the public reveal. The events of that evening, the exposure of their deceit, still lingered in the back of my mind. But unlike what I'd expected, there was no relief in their downfall. No sense of joy or closure. In fact, there was an odd emptiness, as if the weight of the truth had left an unexpected void. The silence that followed the confrontation hung over me like a cloud, and I found myself wrestling with feelings I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just about exposing their lies, it was about confronting the truth of what had happened to my family. My daughter's apologies had come quickly after the reveal, but they were shallow. She had no real understanding of the gravity of her actions. Her words were empty, more out of guilt than any true remorse. She begged, of course, but it felt more like an act, a performance for the sake of saving face. I didn't mean for it to go this far, Mom. I swear, we didn't mean to hurt you. But I knew the truth. They had planned every step. They had deliberately built a life off my sacrifices, and now, they were trying to pretend it never happened. I ignored her first few attempts to reach out. I let her texts go unanswered, her calls ignored. What was there to say? The trust we once shared had been shattered beyond repair. There was no simple apology that could undo the years of emotional damage. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a luxury I couldn't afford. This wasn't about anger. It was about moving on, about protecting myself from any further harm. But then, one day, months after everything had settled down, I found a letter waiting for me on the kitchen table. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakable. Allison. My stomach churned at the thought of reading it. I had told myself I wouldn't get involved again, that I wouldn't be manipulated into believing things could ever return to the way they were. But something inside me hesitated. I took a deep breath and opened the letter. I know I've lost your trust, the letter began. But I'm asking you, please, to let me explain. I've made mistakes, and I am so sorry. I realize now how much I've hurt you, and I can't take it back. But I want to fix things. For us, for our family. Her words felt hollow. The plea was desperate, but it wasn't genuine. It wasn't about the truth anymore. It was about salvaging whatever she could from the wreckage. As I read her letter, the finality of it all hit me once again. This wasn't the daughter I had raised. This wasn't the girl I had poured my heart and soul into. The girl who once shared her hopes and fears with me, the girl who needed me, she was gone. In her place was someone who had made choices without thinking of the consequences. Someone who thought they could use me and walk away without paying the price. I put the letter down and walked away. I didn't need to read any more. I didn't need to hear her excuses. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already been revealed, and there was no going back from it. I realized then that this was it. This was the final consequence. The relationship, the bond, the love, it had all been irrevocably broken. But even after that, Allison didn't stop. She called again. And again. She texted, emailed, and even reached out through mutual friends. Each time, her pleas became more urgent, more desperate. She asked for forgiveness, for a second chance, but I remained silent. I had nothing left to give her. The version of her I had known was gone. The version of her I had trusted to never hurt me like this, she didn't exist anymore. And if she did, she wasn't coming back. In one of the messages she sent, there was a new tone. She was no longer apologizing for what had happened. Instead, she was trying to justify it. You don't understand, Mom, she wrote. I was just trying to make sure we had enough. Ryan and I didn't want to be a burden to you. We were doing what we had to do to survive. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was as if she still didn't get it. It wasn't about survival, it was about betrayal. It was about using me for her own gain. I knew that by not responding, by shutting her out, I was making a decision that would change our relationship forever. There would be no more holidays, no more family dinners, no more watching her grow into the woman I had always hoped she would be. But it wasn't my fault. I had done everything I could to be there for her, to be the mother she needed. And this was how she repaid me. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It wasn't the lies or the stolen money. It was the realization that, despite everything I had done for her, she had chosen to hurt me. She had chosen a path that led us here. She had crossed a line that I couldn't and wouldn't ignore. As time went on, I began to rebuild my life. Slowly but surely, I found my way back to peace. I found comfort in the little things, quiet evenings alone, books I had put aside for years, walks in the park. I reconnected with old friends, people I had neglected in favor of focusing solely on my daughter and her family. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. But there were still days when I couldn't shake the feeling of loss. There were still nights when I wondered what could have been, what we could have had if things had gone differently. But I couldn't change the past. And I didn't want to anymore. Then one evening, out of nowhere, I got a call. It was my daughter. Her voice was different, soft, broken, as if she had finally realized the weight of her actions. Mom, she said quietly. I'm so sorry. I've been so lost without you. I don't know how to fix things, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I miss you. I miss us. I could hear the sincerity in her voice, but it wasn't enough. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of emotion. Maybe it was the exhaustion of carrying this burden alone, maybe it was the years of love that still lingered in the back of my mind, but for a moment, I thought about forgiving her. For a split second, I considered letting her back in. But then, the truth came rushing back. The betrayal. The lies. The consequences. This wasn't something I could forgive just because she said the words I wanted to hear. I took a deep breath before responding. I've heard what you've said, Allison. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you've done. What I know for sure is that you've broken something between us that can never be fixed. I've made peace with that. It's too late. There was silence on the other end of the line. And in that silence, I knew I had made the right decision. I had done everything I could. But now, it was time for me to move forward. That night, as I put my phone down and sat quietly by myself, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The burden of carrying this betrayal, of holding on to the pain, had been lifted. The truth had come out, the consequences had been faced, and I had let go of the past. It was time for me to live the rest of my life for me. And for the first time in months, I felt truly free.